Hello and welcome. We are on the Trauma Resilience podcast. It's so good to see you all and to hear you all, whether you're watching or you're listening. It's really good that you're here. And I'm doing this on Teams. I normally do this on Zoom, which is why I'm a little bit panicky that something could go wrong. And anyone who knows me knows that I have such a distaste for Teams as a facility, but I'm using it today because I've got such a special person that I'm going to be talking with, because you know that this is part of the Brightness of Stars third edition series, where I'm bringing to you people who are in the new book and some people who were in the first edition all that time ago, back in 2013, 2014. And today's guest is somebody who was in the original book. And those were different times, as I've said on every podcast. They were different times. We were connected in very different ways. We were not part of communities online in the way that we are now. So it was a pretty big thing to do that book, and it was a pretty big thing to take part in it. So I am really excited to welcome today Pav.
Hello, Lisa. How are you?
I'm so good. It's so good to have you come on here. And I know that it might have felt quite uncomfortable. Although, can I just tell everybody before we start that my real fondness for your involvement in the original Brightness of Stars was that I was invited onto Woman's Hour, which is a little bit like going on, I can die now. I've been on Woman's Hour. It was a little bit kind of felt like that. A little bit like if I could have my own Guardian column, that's it. I've arrived. That's where I want to be. That's fine. It was a bit like that. And I was kind of very worried about it, and I was very anxious about it. It felt very big. And you came with me and you were amazing. That's how it felt for me. I mean, what was that like for you coming on Woman's Hour? And I don't know if anyone's listening who heard that interview, but
Look, I mean, going to the BBC studios is always a daunting experience for anyone. I think, and Jenny Murray is such a formidable, icon of radio. There are a degree of nerves about it, but also I think what was really nice was that I felt really confident in what we were talking about. We had a really important story to tell. We had an important, um, you know, um, ambition in terms of trying to make things better for people who've come through the experience that you and I have come through, and are going through that system right now. And so the book itself was so powerful in terms of what it collected and what it was telling, that I think Jenny was taken in by that, and rightly so. She understood what we were about, and for me, it was a really enjoyable experience. I really enjoyed it, and it was great to be on Woman's Hour, and feeling part of that. It was really, really great. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It didn't happen again after that, I have to say, but thank you.
No, I haven't been on Woman's Hour since. But one of the things that she did pick up on was around food, and food came up in your chapter and it came up in my chapter. And actually, I think food is such a really interesting way of understanding experience. The food we eat, the food we don't eat, the food we have access to. I remember every placement I had because of the food and where it was bought and who made it and all of those things. And you talked a little bit about food in your original chapter as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have to store it away because I think, I come from a Muslim heritage, Muslim background. And so, I mean, in those days, I don't think there was such an awareness of cultural diversity in quite the same way that we have it now. And it wasn't necessarily accommodated for in the same way. So for me, being able to, I really felt when I was in care that the experience was about deconstructing me as a human being involuntarily. I have to say, it wasn't by choice, and it was about making me vanilla as opposed to what I was. I was a Muslim young British Asian, and that was my cultural identity. It was dual identity. It was complete. It was layered, and really the system tried to strip all of that out of me. The system made me say I can't identify with my faith or my culture. And that's a really dangerous place for a non-white kid to be, or a person of faith to be, because you're already disorientated and dislocated from your reality. And then even the fragments of your reality that you can hold on to, your identity that you can hold on to because they are part of who you are, even that is then stripped away or slowly eroded, and it can become an even more isolating experience. And so food was one of those staples, I suppose, one of those consistencies. It's something I could find, and then when I found it, I would always, my nickname was the squirrel because I would hide my food, or I'd bring and put it in my room, and then I'd nibble on it because what I needed to eat wasn't always readily available. So yeah, it was an interesting thing
Mm.
about food. I'm still
And
like
there's some,
that.
yeah, well, these things run deep, don't
Yeah.
they? There's something really interesting for me in there about what you're saying, because you're talking from the perspective of a history of colonization, but you're also talking about a colonization within care. There's something really interesting for me about that, thinking about the care experience for some people in some decades, because it's such a, there's no there's no kind of, it's
We're
not
not
a
homogenous, yeah. Yeah.
homogeneous thing. It's a very individual experience, just like for everybody in their own family. It's unique depending on what we bring into that. But there's something there for me about that kind of connection in having yourself taken away from you. We see that when we hear about people not being living close to their family, or people being separated from their siblings. You're talking about separation from your faith. I'm wondering if you've thought about that. Have you spent time pondering that from that lens?
Oh yeah, for sure. Look, I mean, I think I was very alert and very aware of um, the structural inequalities. I mean, I often remind myself and others that I learned what structural inequality looks like very, very early because of my care experience. I realized the system was not designed for people like me. It wasn't entirely designed for young people itself. Anyway, I think it was designed for policymakers or those who implement services. It was designed around them and what they thought their needs were primarily, and then children, sort of, people came into the equation, and even then, we were treated as if we were one monolith, one big block, and we weren't really. I mean, I think there was, in my care experience, when I watched some of the young girls and women in particular, and in my days there was grooming going on. It was done differently, but it was absolutely what I would call grooming, what we call grooming
Absolutely.
today. I saw it happening right before my eyes. There would be people, luring people out of the home, with drink, drugs, sex, any level of, activity, and because a lot of the people I was in my care home with were just desperate for love, and that's really what it was about. It was belonging, love, needing some attention, and that was not always provided by the home itself for understandable reasons, and there were boundaries, sometimes too strict perhaps, but the lack of empathy and compassion, not purposefully. I mean, we had some really fantastic care workers in the home, um, but people were drawn out of the home for those reasons. And I think in the same way that, come back to the original question about, just structural experience, as I say, it wasn't necessarily designed for young people in mind. And for me as a non-white, and I was the only non-white kid in my home, my children's home, it was even harder because I didn't really relate to what people did culturally. I came from a tradition of going to school, coming home, going to mosque, then coming home, do my, having my dinner, and then doing my homework, and then going to bed. That was the culture I had quite a disciplined environment, in my family home, before I went into the children's home. So it was quite different to the culture that I was being brought into in the children's home, and that was quite alienating anyway. And then there was the whole layers of, I tried to pray, and that was obviously not approved of by the kids I was in my care home. It automatically made me stand out like as if I was odd, and there wasn't enough facilitation or accommodation of that. But those times, that was the 90s, and different times, and thankfully things have moved on. They've become a bit more aware. As I think the makeup of, or the demographics who go into care now have diversified, so the system has responded to the needs that have emerged and started being more accommodating and recognizing that it has a responsibility. The Equality Act has helped with that as well, of course, to meet needs and diverse needs. So progress is being made, but certainly, your generation, my generation, we went through different times and different experiences, I think.
Yeah. And can I just I mean, you know, it's fascinating to have these deeper conversations with everybody really who's taken part in this beautiful collection of different stories. You know, I love that piece and there's no single story. And I just wondered why you wanted to take part. I mean, because you've come back again. So why did you want to take part the first time? And why did you come back again? And I have to say, everybody bar one person came back again to reflect on their piece, which I was so humbled by, because I just thought some people might just want to not go near it again. You know, it's a very personal experience writing about your experience, isn't it?
I think the original piece was really difficult for me to write. I mean, the irony is I'm a writer. You know, I started as a journalist, and I really struggled to write about the care home experience, my care home experience. Largely because it was too traumatic for me, you know, because it was too close to home. It was my story, and that wasn't one that I was necessarily in a space where I felt comfortable to. I hadn't really come to reconcile it with myself,
Mm.
let alone being able to share it with others. And what I will say is that I am so grateful that I did it, because I think it was part of my therapy or self therapy. It was a really therapeutic process for me as an individual, and also, you know, it allowed me to grieve for some of the really traumatic things that happened to me when I was in care. That, you know, I, s- I still grieve a little bit, because, you know, what happens to you in those early days really informs where you live your life, and um, some of the choices that comes through to you in your you know, that some of the things that you end up doing or not doing in your life. And but it was a really important part of my process, and I you know, I one of the most important things for me, once a piece of work was done, you know, the chapter was written, was I was then able to tell my story. You know, I'd never really been able to open up to people about what I'd gone through, and so the way I would deal with it was I would read them my chapter, and, you know, I'd read them my chapter, they would cry, I would cry, and we didn't really need to say anything more. We just understood why I was the way I was. And I remember I was in a particular relationship at the time, and you know, long term relationship, and my other half, who didn't always get where I was coming from, it kind of made sense.
Mm.
You know, things made sense in the context of what I'd come through. So for me, the process was such an important one in terms of I want to say palate cleanser. You know, it allowed me to rediscover taste, or start living again, and, you know, start enjoying things a little bit more, because I I came to terms, I reconciled what had
Mm.
happened, and or I was starting the reconciliation process. And so that was really good. And also, you know, you said on the outset of this, at the head of this conversation, that in those times we didn't quite have those online
Mm.
communities or virtual spaces, you know, where we could hang out and meet like-minded people, or people who shared experiences. And often you felt this great sense of isolation and um, oddness. You know, that
Mm.
you were othered, you were odd, and people didn't get where you came from. And suddenly you were in a space where you were with other oddballs, you know, who actually weren't that odd, because they had quite the same similar experiences, or in different but similar. And that really allowed, again, you know, it made me feel normal, for want of a better
Yeah, yeah.
expression. It made me feel that it's okay. You know, there was nothing perverse about it. It's not perverse, but um, I wasn't an oddball for having gone through what I'd gone through, and why I was the way I was with authority, or with, you know, with institutions, and, you know, and
Mm.
how I responded to certain things. It made more sense, and it allowed me to, it affirmed for me that that was okay. It was okay not to be okay. It was okay to feel that way, and that it was going to be okay. Actually, in the long run, it was going to be okay, and that, you know, people were coming through. So yeah, that's kind of why I think. Well, I got asked. That's why I contributed, and then I reflected on it and did it. But actually, having gone through the process, I took so much from it, and then, you know, I mean, I remember probably the most candid that I've been was I was at a Bernardo's conference in the Northwest, talking about children who've come through the care home process, and I just remember one line saying that I said to Bernardo's, I said, never stop reaching out, offering a hand of help, even if the young person isn't in a place where they can say yes to you. The fact that you're asking matters more than the world, more than you can realize. That's so important. The child may not be ready to take that help for whatever reason, personal or structural or whatever, but the fact that you're asking keeps reminding them that you care, that they matter, and that's the important bit. And so for me, this book in a way was offering a hand of help and encouragement, saying it will get better, and when you're ready to go on that journey, or take those next steps, know that others have been through it too, and we've all survived it. One way or the other, we've survived it, and that's an amazing thing, to survive that system and to come out healthy, well, and enjoying life, and that really matters. So yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can add anything to that. And you've certainly brought up so much emotion for me talking to you. When you talked about stigma and shame and what happens when we speak to somebody about who we are, and when that is met with empathy, and how all of that stigma and shame has an opportunity to start the process of not being within us, but actually releasing and going somewhere else. It's been so beautiful talking to you, Pal. Thank you so much for gifting your wisdom and your time and sharing some of your real depth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.